Did you ride the worm, Patrice?
I did. I did this.
In real life and in movies, we can pick up so many clues about how people live, how they think, what matters to them by the kind of material culture that they have around them.
If you want to take something like the Fremen tent, what is that? What's the materiality of that?
Like the Harkonnens are really what goes into a septic tanks.
Hello, I'm Paula Benson, founder and editor of Film and Furniture. Today on the Film and Furniture podcast, we explore the design and spaces of Dune 2, director Denis Villeneuve's epic follow-up to the first part of the Dune series, with the film's production designer Patrice Vermette and set decorator Vieau. Join us as we explore how the spaces, homes and objects of the different cultures and houses in Dune express their identities.
So, Patrice, you have worked on Dune 1 as well as Part 2, and also on Arrival and Prisoners and other projects with Denis Villeneuve. So you have a long history. Can you tell us about that?
I knew that Denis had Dune. Dune for him was the best science fiction book that rocked his world in the when he was a teenager. So when he approached me to do the first adaptation, Part 1, I was like, first of all, I fell off my seat and I said, "Are you insane? You." First of all, I know the fan following of of Dune, but also I know how important that book is for you. So with Denis, as always, we think the same. Design cannot be design for design. It needs to have a reason, because design educates the audience of where these people come from, their culture, their economics, and design should also reflect the environment in which these areas or these structures, these buildings exist. So it's always a response to the environment.
Patrice is definitely the overseer of everything when it comes to the design of the film. When we started, there was a 270-page book, a lookbook, and we never deviated from that the whole film. There were no changes. That's what it was. That's what you did. And so for me, it's really about the interpretations of the builds. How do you add texture? How do you enhance that? How do you sort of make that work? And so within that, you work with Patrice to sort of figure out the materiality.
Everything is just perfection, really. Every tiny thing has been thought about. So talking about identities and how spaces reflect identities, but also how, in real life and in movies, we can pick up so many clues about how people live, how they think, what matters to them by the kind of material culture that they have around them. So it'd be great to explore these maybe three different aspects of Dune 2 and how we really understand what matters to these people. So starting with the Fremen on Arrakis, they're obviously living in really harsh conditions. I mean, for a set decorator. So 60% of the film is in the desert. How does a set decorator respond to that?
So everything in their life is extremely utilitarian and has purpose. There's not really much as far as what you would call decoration involved in what they do. Everything that they have serves a purpose for their existence and their living. And the materiality of that, there was a lot of conversations between Patrice and I about the materiality of things and how do we blend those in? How would they make things?
For Arrakis, it was for Part 1. It was a response to a multiple type of things. The environment. You need to build everything at an angle, to survive for the buildings to survive the winds that go at 850 kilometers an hour. You'd also try to find as much humidity as possible. So you'd build these walls super thick, try to avoid direct contact with sunlight again. And so that's how we started, and we imagined the Fremens to be a culture that was always struggling, not just with the colonial entity that would steal the natural resource, exploit the natural resources from their planet, but they also had to survive under like extreme condition of heat. So we were imagining, at the beginning, okay, the desert could be similar to ocean. Maybe they want to go from point A to point B. The direct line is the most dangerous line. So they would travel island to island to avoid being in the open sea as much as possible. So all of that, take into consideration. So on part two, on part one, we started developing our language for those worlds, for the world of Caladan, which was, we had something very romantic that we liked. That we felt that Caladan was very Canadian somehow. It's like a Nordic Canadian mixed with the colors of fall, the fog, the wind crashing on the rocks, those greens and yellows. All the other rooms were smaller, in height. It had wood carvings because it's surrounded by forests. And then when we go to Arrakeen, on Arrakis, the world of Paul Atreides becomes bigger. So the scale becomes, he's so small because he's a small thing, small person in that world that has just grown bigger for him. He doesn't even understand, what's ahead of him. And his character is struggling with his identity and who he is, what he could be. We always put ourselves in okay, if I was a Fremen, okay, if I was a Harkonnen, if I was an Atreides. And one thing that is that was interesting on part two is that we were able to develop those world, the world of Giedi Prime, which we had just barely touched on part one, the world of the Fremen, and show who they are, their identity, how they live, their culture through art, furniture, and design of the architecture, and seeing the sand seeping in through showing their struggle, their everyday struggle.
So talking about identities and how spaces reflect identities, but also how, in real life and in movies, we can pick up so many clues about how people live, how they think, what matters to them by the kind of material culture that they have around them.
If you want to take something like the Fremen tent, what is that? What's the materiality of that? Is it a worm skin? How do they build that into the things that they do? It looks very simple on film, but, something like that tent took 6 to 8 months to develop. It is the fabric alone. I had a company in New Zealand called the Textile Collective, which was a group of 12 women that all have different skill sets to work with fabrics. And, that fabric alone is a 5 to 7 ply fabric, which was heavily, heavily designed, laser cut leather to silk that's silk screened. Then it's all plied together with an acetate. And then it has to have a hardening agent to give it its concave shape. And, these parameters that Denis and Patrice set with that just really make you want to perform. And it gives you something to do that has never been seen before.
Yeah, and I guess, obviously living in caves, how do you make a cave interesting for the viewer? But we notice all these little details of little inscriptions and all sorts of things going on, right? And it's not just a carved rock.
I was imagining if they would try to write their stories, just like Egyptians, or they would try to, in case someday they disappear, archaeologists of the future would come and say, okay, these people, it's a way to say we exist. We were there, and this is our story. And the same thing goes for the Cave of Birds. The Cave of Birds is basically the cave where they retreat after the Harkonnen attack. But on this one, the motif on the walls is fingerprints, because that's another sense of identity. It's unique to every individual. And it's to in case they disappear, because for any reason, whether it's the harshness of the sand seeping and they just disappear, just vanish, but at least they leave their legacy. They leave a proof of their existence.
Gives me shivers down the spine, really, because it's about sort of marking territory in the most meaningful way, and in the way that cave dwellers did, probably not sure how long they'd be there or how long they'd exist, which is how the Fremen lived.
Yeah, absolutely. They never. It's a constant battle. It's and they just want to say, hey, we exist. We existed. Or yeah.
and preserving their stories. Their stories are in every set that you go into. It's all there, and it's subtle, but very beautiful.
The shape of the tents is based on cockroaches. Cockroaches, they survive everything, even the nuclear explosion. So and it's also perfect for the wind. It's like the wind sweeps over it. So it's always like a response to the environment, to what they're going through.
Yeah, and a real harmony with nature, a lesson for all of us, I guess. And then we must talk about the sandworm ride, one of the most epic scenes ever in film, let's face it. So how did you go about creating production design, set decoration for that?
Well, that's Denis at his best. Like we all had our idea of what the sandworm ride would be, like Paul's first sandworm ride. And then one day around a big table, conference table, we're all like, isn't in these meetings, in these movies, I think one of the best moments is when we all think, we all have the basic visuals, but then we are called for a methodology meeting. One of the first one we had was about the worm riding scene. And we saw like Denis' unique take on, and we were like, we had all our big eyes and we were like, okay, how do we do that? So for us, it was basically we did a 80-foot worm skin, which a worm skin is basically, there's two things that inspired the texture, the design of that. Is a dry lake with all the scales, on a dry lake. Also the bark of a tree.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we discussing with Denis, like, but when they pull, like, what would make the worm, because of that size, and what would those, how? So we decided, oh, maybe they should have some breathing, so underneath the scale, when the harpoon or grabs it, so that the wind goes in and the sand goes into the breathing devices that they have, and it's like the worm tries to, and that's how they can steer the worm. We had two different rigs for that. One was a vertical rig, which was the 80-foot worm skin by 20 feet wide, leaning on the side of a sound stage, and that would like give, like, just sometimes like fluctuate or make it at a steeper angle. And then we also had another one of those worm skin on a gimbal, motion base, and that was horizontal, but it could like go like this, turn. So
Did you ride the worm, Patrice?
I did this playing like a child, which we all are, actually, because when we do those movies, we are all back in our 7-year-old state. And then obviously when they travel together, besides the first worm rig, then when they travel together, and then the palanquin was also something that Shane brought on the table. How does Jessica, like, travels on those, because she's now a reverend mother. So, and she's pregnant. So how do they take care of her? Figuring out, like, how do they get on?
The winds on those things, 60 to 80 kilometers an hour. You've got sand flying everywhere. How do you keep those shelters and that palanquin stay in place? It is definitely a lot of trial and error, but when that thing is going, it is absolutely beautiful to watch.
It's epic. One of the most memorable scenes in film, let's face it. So how do you go about, like, choosing sand dunes for Dune? I mean, obviously you shot in Jordan and Abu Dhabi. I mean, did you just kind of like look at masses of bits of desert?
We did, like in Abu Dhabi, it's crazy. We built two backlots in looking straight south. So we would have like east, south, and west. Like we could look like 180 degrees, and throughout the day we could change, with the direction of the sun, the shadows. But the sand dunes, the specific sand dunes, that was a bit of a search. It looks ridiculous, but the wind sculpts the sand dunes. So in the morning, they're lit a certain way, and the flat, the way they're shaped, you need to find like a double for the afternoon as well. And it was a bit of a search, because the wind doesn't necessarily, It's not the next necessarily the Dune next to that first Dune that's going to match for the afternoon.
The book, The Art and Soul of Dune Part 2, is another gateway to immerse yourself in the world of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2 movie and discover the incredible creative journey that brought this new installment to the big screen. It's written by Dune executive producer Tanya Lapointe, who, by the way, is a big fan of Film and Furniture's Instagram. So this book, together with many other books on film and design, is available from our marketplace at filmandfurniture.com.
It's so obvious now you've said it, but it didn't even occur to me that this whole landscape is changing every 5 minutes. You're shooting in a place that's never the same from 1 minute to the next.
When you look at the storyboards, my first impression was like, okay, it's going to maybe take 3-4 different locations. It took 12 in 3 different countries to make it, because that's the thing, with Denis, when he arrives with his storyboards, it's like, okay, let's do this. It's so exciting. It's like, okay, but to do this, then you start realizing, okay, there's an issue there that we need to think about. So it's like, it's an ongoing process, but it's always towards the goal is to realize, to make these storyboards come to life,
So just before we move on to other cultures and other identities, there's the scene where we're still in the desert, where they discover the arsenal, the hidden arsenal that's been there for so long. And there's this amazing scene where we go inside and you're going to have to really help. Yeah. The light.
The small glow globe.
Yeah. Tell us.
Okay. So thank you for asking that question. Because that's something that actually shows how we all work together. It's funny because that set I had and imagined it while waiting at an airport, and then coming back to Budapest. I started focusing on how that thing is lit. Is it going to be natural lighting coming from the sides or is it like total darkness? Because and then we thought, like, we're discussing with Denis, okay, it should be like a light that goes, like a small light that goes like, and I said, how can we make that light more interesting? What if it was just like slits, a bit like this, in a lot of sets, the light is just like light slits coming from the ceiling or the sides. So I had these 2 versions. I had the soft version of the light, the small glow globe traveling, and the other one which had the slits of light.
It's just so architectural, the way it has these shards of light and the way it captures the sort of angles of the as you walk in. It's incredible. I absolutely love that light. So moving on to a very different world, the world of the Harkonnen, the Giedi Prime. The contrast is incredible, right? So it's very industrial, it's very brutal, it's very dark, it's quite glossy in places, and then you shift the camera, it suddenly goes to black and white. I read it was infrared. I'd love you to talk more about that. But the world that you created here, I read something about septic tanks.
Absolutely. I know it's super funny, but Denis always thought of that world of black plastic black molded plastic. And there was an epiphany that happened to me. I was driving around, there was this field filled with septic tanks, black plastic molded septic tanks, and it looked like Giedi Prime. And I was like, this is a great start. I think it's a great start to start playing with those shapes, those curved shapes, and the little shine that it has on the edge, on the curved edges. And so the design, obviously it's not like septic tanks, but it's based on those different models of septic tanks that you can find, and then creating rooms, the different rooms, whether it's the Baron's room where he takes a bath, which is basically based on the float in the toilet tank with the thing that
the bobber.
Yeah. So it's like I had a play, because also, like, the Harkonnens are really what goes into a septic tanks.
The undulations, the black curves is a repeating theme in their world. So it's in the buildings, it's in the bath, it's in this chair when they walk into the arena, the gladiator arena. So Shane, with things like the the bath and the chair where he's carried in? Is that something that you designed?
Well, you know, Patrice is definitely the overseer of everything when it comes to the design of the film. So within that, you work with Patrice to sort of figure out the materiality, what works best on the throne. And with that throne, there was the breathing apparatus of the Baron. That was completely a physical effect. That was not VFX. It completely did what it did. And it was such a beautiful thing to see. It was only supposed to be seen once or twice, but we ended up seeing that thing a lot, and it really, really worked. But what's great about most of these worlds is that the parameters of what you do are very narrow with respect to color. It's how you inflect texture and highlighting of color within that. It's a real different way of thinking, but this film is a perfect reflection of how to do that.
When we were talking about the breathing apparatus and the floating throne of the Baron, like we thought about, okay, well, and you are asking, we should, of course, every element should be at its own levitation, and the solution was to put that on 3 different cranes.
Yeah, they moved all differently, and Guy was able to interpret and make that happen. Like the guy was phenomenal, and to be able to make all of that a practical effect is a feat in itself.
Yeah, and I guess, in the way that there's no such thing as black, there are a billion, 100 different types of black. So, I mean, I guess you had to test lots of different types of color and texture and gloss and matte and
Absolutely, and you know what? With the infrared black and white, because that's something that Denis had imagined. He always wanted, like, the black sun of Giedi Prime would suck up all the colors, so it would give like a black and white feeling. And Greg Fraser said, well, maybe it could be like infrared. The infrared camera created some amazing effects, especially for the eyes. But it also created some headaches for not for us, but for costumes and makeup. Because the thing that we found is that Jacqueline would bring like black fabric with a veil, and it would turn white. Some of the fabric that was black stayed black.
the gladiator arena. Why triangular?
Why not? Because it's like, okay, it could be a circle, it could be but I think a triangle gives a good opportunity for every spectator to see what's going on properly. I think it's a good shape for it. It's different. That's the reason.
And also incredibly visual. I mean, it's a very stunning, unexpected shape in the middle of the film there. And then I think there's the Colosseum in Rome was built a very particular oval, I believe.
An oval, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you could
Yeah.
see the fight from most angles.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it's funny because when we're designing, we were putting in the model, okay, what does that person see? How does that person see? How does that person see? What's the point of view between the Bene Gesserit and the tower where the Baron is? So it's a good view from all around.
Another very different world, the Imperial world. And I hadn't realized this till I was doing some research before talking to you, that this is a real place by Carlo Scarpa. Could you talk to us about this?
Yes. Carlo Scarpa, for me, has always been an architect that I admired his work. And on part 1, sorry, he was essential into my his aesthetics, or stuck in my brain, and highly influential on the design of both Caladan and Arrakeen. All the steps, all the way the volumes that he uses, when on part 2 we there was a scene in the gardens of Kaitain, the Imperial planet. I suggested to Denis a couple of gardens around the world where we could shoot, and I said it would be great because it's pretty close, from Budapest, where we're based, the commune of Ativoli, northern Italy, in Venetia, and it would be great to pay tribute to the person or the architect who influenced the world of Dune, part 1, as the Romans, it's the Imperial planet. So I thought it would be a good thing to start, to have the planet, the gardens in Carlos Scarpa's masterpiece, Tombabrion. And this is where, the original is. So that's what's the train of thought. We learned that nobody had ever shot there. Then there was no permission for filming there before. So they approached it, and when they learned it was Dune, they asked to meet me. And to be honest, it's the first time I ever cried walking onto a location. It's so perfect. It's so the intricate details. It's like it looks like brutalism, but it's not really. It's really Carlos Scarpa's world. So we shot inside the chapel of the Brion, and that's where Shane. I'll let you talk about how you augmented that space. But we also shot in the garden. There's a pergola there. It was a moment I will always remember.
It's incredible because it doesn't ground us in any world that we're familiar with or any time, right? Because there's influences from Venice. I believe you studied in Venice. There's a bit of Le Corbusier and modernism in there, and then there's a Japan reference as well, like these kind of black grid screens.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't. So it's kind of like it's not a familiar world, really. So and an incredibly beautiful world. And then there's this scene, obviously, where Florence Pugh character is sitting, narrating, writing her notes on this machine. She's sitting on this chair, which sort of reminds me a little bit of a Bugatti, with this beautiful gold cabinet behind her. And this bit, just tell me all about that scene, please.
Right.
It definitely was an homage to Italian design, and those pieces with they are definitely an homage to Bugatti, but they were all handmade, leather inlay and beautiful copper pounding and really great gold detail all painted in. And they were all purposely built for that. And, it was only 4 or 5 pieces of furniture, and that's all you needed for the room. Just the beauty and simplicity.
And then this machine that's sort of taking, what is it called, that's taking notes that she's dictating?
A Shigawar.
Is this a real thing, or did you invent this?
No, it's a real thing from the Dune universe. That's in the book. It records, the voice, and it engraves on a cylinder.
Which harkens back to pneumatic devices early on when they did record, because they would record into the wax, which basically what the Shigawar does. So it was a very, very simple machine, but it absolutely beautiful.
So I haven't studied the details, but that's a whole language as well that's been developed.
Yes, absolutely.
Alphabet.
Absolutely. Yes. All of it. There's the Harkonnen language. There's the Kaitain language alphabet. There's the Shakobza for the Fremen, and there's the Arturdes. They all have their own language.
And this Scapa building, I understand, was created by the Brion Vega family. So the Brion family, Brion Vega, who created all these incredible hi-fis and stereos and cube radios in the 60s, which I love anyway. I mean, the connection just blew my mind.
I know that's a total coincidence that that's the Brion and that we had the Shigawar there, but yeah, absolutely. But I encourage anybody who's going in that region of Italy to visit that cemetery. It's just beautiful, and it's full of symbolism. There's the constellation of Vega. It's just extraordinary.
That cemetery is so simplistically small, but there's so much within it. It really is one of the wonders of the world. It is so beautifully built, and it stands the test of time. And it is still to this day one of the most beautiful pieces of architecture I've ever seen.
So, are you inside Messiah yet?
My God, I could tell you no, I could tell you yes, but I can't tell you anything.
You can't. Okay. Where we go, right? If
I don't know, no, but eventually, I think there will be a movie. I don't know when.
Of course, it's happening. So, if you had to take one piece home from the set for your own home, what would it be, please, Shane?
Oh, that's such a great question. But for me, it's the flag, the iconic flag, was a symbol of freedom. It was a symbol of fighting, and it is one of the most beautiful things ever built. It looked so gorgeous in the film, and I absolutely loved it. The flag.
Yeah, amazing choice. And Patrice?
The breathing apparatus. It's just beautiful.
Guys, congratulations on such an epic. I mean, it really, I hate that word epic, right? It's so cheesy and so nasty, but there is no other word to describe the incredible work that you did on this film. I mean, it's extraordinary. And the intelligence and the thinking and the detail and the big, big sky thinking is next level. Thank you for sharing your extreme nerdiness with another nerd.
Thank you for having us on your show. You have an amazing, amazing show, and we appreciate you having us.
I hope you enjoyed that insightful chat. You can take a look at our in-depth feature as well, with lots of film set images at filmandfurniture.com, where you'll find many fascinating articles on interiors, furniture, decor and lighting in film, as well as where to find these items for your own home. That's all in our marketplace. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time.